explain the 0 to 3.
Well, I think when you first start a business, you have to be self-aware enough that you probably don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And because you don't know what you're doing, there's an analogy that, like, let's say your kid is really bad at math and really good at tennis. A lot of parents will lean right away like, let's get the kid a math tutor, when in reality, one of the best lessons is get your kid a tennis coach. And so in business, we don't always have that opportunity to take a step back like we do as parents and be like, well, maybe we should focus on this, maybe we should focus on this, because we started this business. Why? Because we were a technician or a worker at some other type of company, or our parents did something, or we had a job and we saw that there was an opportunity to do something a different way. So then you start this business because you think you've solved a problem, but you have to realize that there's so many different aspects of business that you're kind of putting yourself through college, either for the first time or again, in that first 0 to 3 years.
Let's talk about that real quick for the first 0 to 3, because someone that's not a true business owner, as myself, right?
Or myself.
Right. What are the different aspects of the business?
I think when you first start a business, you have to recognize, like, what problem can I solve that people will pay me money for because they don't want to do something, they can't do something, they don't have enough time to do something, like, whatever the case is. This goes all the way from home service to local businesses to consulting to labor, like, it doesn't matter. Every business owner, when they start a company, is like, I have a product or service that someone needs, and I'm gonna figure out how to charge for it. And we were talking about a story a little bit the other day of the difference between, like, the guy that started to sell a pet rock and the brain surgeon. The idea is, like, no matter what business you're in, you have to figure out, one, how much money can you make? And two, how much can you charge people for the service you offer? And there's some exercises to go through that'll get you to the end of that path. But I think that the most important thing is, like, recognizing what you're good at, what you like doing, what you're not good at, and what you don't like doing. And the sooner you can hold yourself accountable for doing more of the things that you like doing or you're good at, or finding other people to do the things that you simply don't want to do or that you're bad at, there's, like, levels to the success in business. And I think a lot of that just takes self-awareness. But sometimes we get so stuck in the fuck of doing everything, or maybe not being able to give up enough control, or maybe not trusting that someone can do something as good as you, or not really having the systems and processes in place. Maybe you've tried to do these things a couple times and you keep failing. There's a level of self-awareness that we take on as a business owner that first day we go file for our tax ID that I think a lot of us just don't become very aware of until later phases in business.
So the first delegation tip that you would say there is, because everyone says, like, the last thing you should delegate is this, but that's wrong if you're very good at that certain thing, right? So you should, that's the first step for everyone in the 0 to 3, you would say, is figure that exercise of what are you good at?
If you are able, as early as possible as you can in business, and some of us are not capable of this level of self-awareness right away because there's so much going on. But when you can take a step back and simply hold yourself accountable for what you're good at, what you want to do, what you're not good at, or what you don't want to do. This could be an exercise you do every month. This could be an exercise you do quarterly. This could be an exercise you do once a year, depending on where you're at in your business and your stages of growth. I think what's really, really important as we discuss these different methods and principles is, like, life, business, relationships, parenting, it doesn't matter. Self-awareness is key. Like, you have to know who you are, what you bring to the table, what you're good at, what you need help with. And until you can be honest with yourself about some of those questions, you're gonna have these limited, we call them glass ceilings. You're gonna hit your head on something that you can't get past until you let something go, until you give up control, until you're able to be like, this doesn't necessarily need to go my way. It just needs to go the right way. Something I always say to my leadership team is like, look, Joey, I don't need to be right. I just need someone to be right. So then we can all keep the ball moving forward.
What gave you the realization and the clear path and the perspective of saying, it's time to do this?
Well, for me, it's taken 15 years.
Right.
You know, overnight success usually takes at least a decade.
Right.
And so when I look at my path, my journey from starting my first business when I was 25 to almost I'll turn 40 this year, is like, when I reflect on the things that I was focused on, like most things in life, you might rewind and do things a little bit differently. I think for me, as I had my first child when I was 28, and as a parent and a business owner, I think a lot of us that have kids can say, in my business, I have a business so I can have more time. And over the years, what I saw is like my natural habits, the way that I work, I was doing the opposite of what I thought was success, which was being able to spend more time at home, be around my family. I think as the years went by and I got into different businesses or was focused on some different things over the years, it was like I just started to focus more on my strengths and was more willing or able to give up some control of the things I wasn't as good at. Because for me, I would focus a little bit less on the things I was good at and a little bit more on the things that I didn't want to do or I wasn't good at. Exactly, and that's not the case. Like, if you're not a good accountant, you don't need to go take a QuickBooks course.
Right.
You should focus on, are you good at sales, are you good at marketing, and then hire someone. I mean, this day and age, it's not like every single one of your employees needs to be in your office. They have fractional employees, they have remote employees, and so one piece of advice that I would give to early business owners in that stage of business of like 1 to 3 years, simply hold yourself accountable for the best things you bring to the table and be a little bit more willing to give up control of the things that you don't understand, that you're not as good at, because there are experts in everything. And as your business grows, you should still, one of the sayings I like to use is like, paint the room before you hire the painter. Before you give your P&L statement to an accountant, at least go through it and look at it and understand it. Or make a list of questions you have of things you don't understand to go to an expert to get the advice so you can paint the room once and then go hire the painter to finish the rest of the project.
You know, I think you've been a good mentor, big bro, whatever you want to call it for me, on like checking me on some stuff. It's like, oh, I hate this or I hate that. When like processes and systems, I'm actually pretty dope at creating them. Like, I just don't like following them.
Well,
right? So I wanted to get there. So it's like us as visionaries, like we can see stuff and I know it needs to be laid out like this. It's just, I know that I'm best bet on kind of being, there has to be structure. As ADHD as I am, it's like I don't want structure, but like when you are like we are, you still need the structure or else you'll go everywhere. What would you say to those people that act like, man, systems, processes, like, do you really have to follow it to a T, or that's not your job as the CEO? It's to make it and then manage the people to do it.
3 letters, EOS. When we implemented the entrepreneurial operating system into Dope Marketing, remember, our company's only 4 years old.
Yeah.
When we implemented it about 1.5 years ago, it just unlocked some of my superpowers as a CEO and a visionary, because I'm similar to you. I can think through and lay out a system pretty well. The day-to-day management of the expectations around those systems, it makes my fucking brain hurt to constantly have to ask people if they remember what their responsibility is or checking in on them or going through it. It's not something I'm naturally very good at. So as you grow and as you expand, one thing that we do very well is quarterly and annual planning in my businesses now, because for so long, like, I'm very good with my back to the wall or being able to shoot off the hip and just like get some shit done. But that's not always very predictable. Like, I am convincing. I can come up with an idea and tell everyone about it and they're like, yeah, Dave, you seem pretty confident about this. It's a good idea. But being able to lay out my expectations and put those into a system and have the system actually managed, that was one of my keys to unlocking what some people define as success, because I put the people around me that are good at the things that I'm not good at, or want to do the things that I don't want to do. Like, there's a person in this world for every job, and hiring is not easy. But like most things in life, as long as you set the right expectations and you communicate what your expectations are, you can line up steps that lead towards meeting your expectations. I think it was Gary Vee once said, like, if you find an employee to do 70% of what you can do, you found a great employee. I couldn't disagree with that more. I think if you find someone to do 35% of what you can do, or even go to a lower number. I know that as a visionary, as a founder, as a decent salesperson, as someone who understands marketing, what I can do in an 8-hour session, if I was to expect someone to do 70% of that, it would be insanity. But if I can have clear expectations, lay out a process where the end result is what I want, and I can put someone in the place to oversee that those steps are being done, it allows me to do things that I'm good at to 70 to 100%, and then delegate some things under me. Layers of management are something that I learned so much about, because for me, the first company I started was a home service company. I needed someone to show up almost on time, be sober, and be able to climb a ladder, is where my initial hiring, first 50 employees that I hired, was under that mentality. And then as I got into other businesses, I always felt like, well, I can do something and I can explain it, so it should be easy. But I kept hitting that glass ceiling. Like I was going through employees every 3 to 6 months, or I would put something in place and it would never really go the way I wanted it to. And I saw that it was one thing for me to be directly communicating with employees, but because I'm not the greatest people manager in the world, it was a layer of management between me and employees that I could explain something to someone, explain how I wanted it done, but then give up control enough to let someone hold me accountable for how it was gonna go based on what I put into it. So now I'm communicating through someone in the middle, not directly to an employee. And then as long as we're aligned, me and the manager, and we're meeting weekly on what are the expectations. There's an exercise I call the stoplight exercise to kind of analyze any employee who comes from EOS. But I found that me dealing directly with employees, I try to get better every day at having like well-communicated, realistic expectations. Because for those of us visionary founders, fair to say we kind of hold ourselves to like high expectations. And one of the biggest faults I know I didn't realize the whole time in my career was I was holding others to the same expectations I was holding myself. That's not fair to them. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to anyone in between.
I'm getting way better at that, as in like mentally, like even with Jeff, I'm like, man, I wish he could just manage people and do this. Like that's how he's gonna scale. That's how he's gonna grow. But at the end of the day, like everyone isn't, you know, if he's a bird to fly, he's not meant to swim in that area. Let's tap into that then. Like, cause the 0 to 3, you're trying to find people, and if they're similar to us, because I think that's why we work well, is you're the CEO, you come to me, and then I have the creative chemistry
To be able to,
because, hey, managing creatives ain't no joke. If you're not someone that can get down, you know, I know how to do it. I'm not as good as the other people, but I don't need to be as good. Let's talk about that. Someone that says, oh, I'm not just a leader, I'm not a manager. Would you say that is the step that they need, is just having that relationship with someone that's in between them? Or is that not even in the 0 to 3?
I think if you look at the things that you should be focusing on in your first 3 years in business, it goes back to the exercise. But that exercise of figuring out what you're good at, what you like to do, what you don't like to do, and what you're not good at, you have to do that exercise with your employees or your contractors as well. It might be a surprise, but not most people are gonna say no when you offer them an opportunity, especially if they work for you. And there's a couple reasons for that. Let's say you have a sales team and it's 4 people and all of them have been there for around like the same amount of time, but you have one guy that just performs way better than the other 3 people. That doesn't necessarily mean that person should be a manager. And we think so much that because historically in corporate, it's like you get trained, you go to the next level. You get trained, you go to the next level. You get trained, you go to the next level. And I think what we found in the past 20, 30 years is like that's not necessarily the case. It's actually this thing called the Peter Principle, where it says an employee can grow to their level of training and then they'll hit a ceiling. And it'll kind of like show someone's true colors. If you haven't looked it up, look up the Peter Principle. But it's a way, I think this was defined back in like the 1970s, where basically an employee's progression in their career would be limited by their amount of training, but when they hit that ceiling, if they can't get trained anymore, then they're stuck in that part of their career forever. And this is where you see people get in the same job for 25 years, not much progress. Or if you've had people come into your business and say like, I can't grow anymore here, it could be an expedited version of that principle. I think it's our job when you look at your best employees or your worst employees, or people, I like to say like big paws on a puppy, like someone that has a lot of potential. Communication with your employees is essential, because when you hire someone, you got to ask them like, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? I like to ask people like, what's your 1, 3, and 5 year plan? Are you having kids? Are you buying a dog? Are you trying to buy a house? Like, where are you going? And if you have more of an understanding of what someone else wants, it'll be less likely for them to just simply agree with you when you offer something or when an opportunity arises, because in my career, I've seen people that had all the potential in the world and that I kind of tried to drive in one direction, and that ended up not being the right direction because that person would have probably done better going down a path of getting better at what they're good at than me making up a role for them because I thought they had more potential to do something else. Because the sad thing is, no one is going to say no when you offer them an opportunity. Very few people are going to say no when an opportunity is offered. So it's like, hey, management, hey, advancement, hey, more money, more responsibility. Who's going to turn that down?
On next week's episode of Dope Conversations.
It gets overlooked because it sounds cliche or corny or cheesy, but it's culture, right? 0 to 3 years, you're like, I'll figure the culture out. Right now, I need to make some damn money, you know? What insight would you give for someone? Are the cliches correct?
I think when you look at creating culture, especially from the beginning, starting a company,
This is Dope Conversations.